Hi, Sean.
Mute.
We messed with this a little bit last week. We just want to know how it sounds.
We've got some folks popping in on Zoom. The volume is always out of balance, quite frankly. It's either too loud or full of feedback. Or sometimes it's too soft, but that's the rarest of the three. It's almost like the volume that where you end on the day, like if I have to end up turning it all the way up just to be able to hear something. If I end for the day, and next Zoom loud, and then you get back to volume.
See, now it says I'm sure.
So
Participants, is that it?
but you can hear it's too loud, but the volume is right there. So it's not even turned up all the way. Hi, everyone. We're still getting everybody joined into the panel.
There's like, how do I get my? That's where we're in right now. Oh, let's go find, maybe my name. Your deputy chief.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
One of those things. Yeah, I'd love to get it. But it's just so low on the totem pole. Like I say, it's not.
Hey, Ivan. Your
Testing,
camera
testing.
is sideways.
Actually, I'm going to run some.
Take that.
Yeah, yeah.
Hang it up.
Put it like that.
Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Maybe if I was on the right chord. I don't know.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Jeff, do you have a pen that I can borrow? Oh, Sean, hi. John, you have an extra pen over there somewhere? A pen or pencil? Steal one from Jeff.
Still one from jail.
Thank you so much. All right, so let's see. I see Nisha's over here. Hi, Nisha. I think this is Ivan Chapman, correct?
That's correct.
All right, hello to you. Then let's see. Kim Morga.
Right here.
Hi, Kim. I don't think that we've met before. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Let's see. Aaron Oliver, I see you. Hello. Christina Sanchez, hello. I see Brian Blevins as well. Did I miss anybody so far? Yes, I did. I missed Kelly McMahill. Hello to you.
Hi there.
And I think that there's Nick as well. Hi, Nick. All right, so we are recording this. There really is no audience, so we don't have to start right on time. So I figured I'd use this time. Hi, Marshall Schofield, how are you?
Your Honor, his audio is still connecting to this
Okay.
conference.
So I figured we use this time to see if anybody had any questions. I know, Kim, we haven't gotten a chance to speak. Christina, we did not speak much about this either.
Are you going to ask the questions and we will answer, or do we just present?
Actually, so I think that I sent you the questions. I know there were a bunch of questions for regarding being a translator, Chris. So if you could just touch upon some of those questions. Essentially, there's 4 areas that we're going to be talking about, and by the time that we get to you, Chris, you'll pick up on this. It's the importance of public service, the paths that each of us has taken to get to where we are, what our jobs consist of, and what opportunities may exist for these students to spend time with you so that they can find out more about these fields. Marshall, can you hear us okay? All right. Marshall, any questions?
No, Your Honor, I'm fine. Thank you.
All right. Kim, how about you? Any questions?
No, I'm good. I got a copy of the questions in advance and I kind of have some information handy. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. All right, I think then with that, we can go ahead and get started. Just give me the thumbs up, Jeff, when we're ready to start recording.
Your Honor, we are recording to the cloud right now.
All right. Well, welcome all of you and all of our panelists to this conversation that we're about to have regarding the importance of public service, the paths that each of us has taken to get to where we are, what each of our jobs consist of, and what opportunities may exist for each of you to develop additional conversations with all of these panel members to find out what it is that their jobs consist of and how you can find out more information about that. First, I'd like to applaud all of you for participating in the Jobs for Nevada Graduates program. This is really a wonderful way of staying focused and learning what it is that you need to do to achieve your goals for whatever plans you may have laid out for you. I myself did not have such a program available to me, and I know that it would have been very helpful to be able to participate in such a program. So I applaud you for being here and for taking advantage of this opportunity. I'd also like to thank Ann Wanziak, who is the Director of Resource Development, and Michelle Cody for bringing this panel to life. Next in my list of thanks is this incredible panel that we have here before us. You will soon get to know each of them, but I wanted to let you know that I have worked closely with most of them and they have tremendous information to offer to you, so please pay attention, take notes, so that you know who it is that you would like to follow up with later on. With that, I will turn out to each of our participants, and along the way, I'm going to ask you to offer any advice or tips that you might have for these students as they find their way and plan the future for themselves. So with that, let me just start out with Kelly McMaple. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about your career path?
Okay, I get to be first. Yay. Thank you for this opportunity, first and foremost. I really do appreciate it. So as you can see by my uniform, I'm a Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Officer. And actually, I now have reached the rank of Deputy Chief. So what that means is I've worked my way up from police officer all the way through the ranks of captain, where I had my own police station. And I've now been appointed by Sheriff Joe Lombardo as a member of his staff. I currently run human resources and all of our training sections, as well as our volunteer program. I do want to take a minute to talk about how I came to this profession, because it certainly was not by any normal path. I actually was in college at UNLV singing opera, and I was fairly certain I was going to be a famous opera singer. You can see how that worked out for me today. I had a full scholarship. I was flying through school, and I found a job while I was in college catching shoplifters at JCPenney's at the Boulevard Mall. And so one day I'm catching shoplifters, and they decided to shoot at us. And I ended up running towards the gunfire to try to get some folks into custody. And along came the Metropolitan Police Department to investigate the crime that we just had take place on our property. And I remember to this day, there was an older gentleman, and he was a gang unit detective. And he said, you know, most normal people do not run towards gunfire. Have you ever thought about being a cop? And I said, absolutely not. I said, I'm a singer. I'm not, no way. So he talks me into getting into a police car and doing a ride along. And I was 22 years old. I got in the car that night. I spent a 10-hour shift in a marked black and white unit, patrolling actually near UNLV area. And by the end of that shift, I knew that I found my new career path. I'd never had a more exciting 10 hours in my entire life. We had a stolen car. We had domestic violence, you name it. I feel like we had everything in one shift. And within a year from that day, I was raising my right hand and being sworn in as a police officer, and I've never looked back. I've been on for 24 years, and I will tell you that in spite of what we all see going on in the news media and across this country today, in my heart and in my mind, what I know is that serving our public is the most noble calling that there is. And I would do it all over again. As a matter of fact, my oldest son starts the next police academy, and I couldn't be more proud that he's entering this profession. You're going to hear from a lot of people today that that took their own path to entering the career that they're in. Again, mine was unique, but I think I was able to bring to this job something that was a little bit different, a background that wasn't military, as so many of our guys have. And you're going to hear from one of our sergeants soon. I know that his path as well was not the normal, quote unquote, normal path. I'll just tell you this: if you have a heart to serve, there are so many opportunities to do it within law enforcement. And I think that today will be very interesting, not just for all of you listening, but for those of us sitting on this panel. So thank you, Judge. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. Let me ask you, Deputy McMahill, did you have to go to college to be where you're at? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So no, if you want to hire on to be a police officer, all you need is a high school diploma. Military background is fantastic, absolutely not necessary. And along the way, if you want to promote, however, you do need to get your college degree. So I ended up not completing my college degree. When I did that ride along that night, I was solely focused on becoming a police officer. So I actually finished my degree about 1.5 years ago. I don't recommend that. It was a little hard with 5 children at home and a full-time job. But if you want to promote now within the agency to sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and above, you do have to have at least an associate's degree to be a sergeant. Anything beyond sergeant, so lieutenant, captain, and certainly the rank that I'm at today, you have to have at least a bachelor's degree. But so many of our officers do hire on with a high school diploma, and then they find a way to continue their education while they're working here.
Thank you so much. So one thing that I wanted to point out to you is, and I'm sure that you're going to hear along the way, is that typically we end up falling into the careers that we end up at. It's not, very few people actually end up doing what they think they're going to be doing when they're in high school. So pay attention to those doors that open along the way, because you might find yourself working at a department store just like Deputy McMahill did, and ending up finding your career that way. So be attentive to those opportunities and try to experience as much as possible to find out what it is that you may like. Another thing that I want to say before we turn over to Officer Chapman is something else that Deputy McMahill said that's very important. Life has a way of complicating itself. So the earlier that you can go to school, if that's what you choose to do, the better, because most of us will end up having a partner, having kids, and kids end up complicating things. It's not impossible to still finish school if you have kids or if you're planning on having kids, but it's certainly more difficult. So just also be mindful of that. All right, Officer Chapman, I'll turn to you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sergeant Ivan Chapman with Las Vegas Metro Police. Can you guys hear me pretty well? Okay, I'm Sergeant Ivan Chapman with Las Vegas Metro Police Department. I've been on the department of the Metro for 21 years. And like Deputy Chief McMahill, my path wasn't destined to be a police officer from in high school, or I had my goals set on this profession. I kind of fell into it. So having said that, I'll explain a little bit about my background and where I grew up, because it's critically important of how my character was shaped and built and how I landed in this profession, and ultimately how I changed my mindset about progressing in life and making good decisions. So I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, in a very poverty-stricken neighborhood. I've seen a lot of crime, and a lot of my family members had been arrested. And I think in my family, only two people that had not been arrested had been only my brother and myself. And that's because we stuck together and we helped each other out. So that kind of lets you know the environment we grew up in. And it was in the 70s, so there was racial segregation in the area that I grew up in, with a lot of lack of resources. And because of a lack of those resources, once I graduated high school, which I ultimately moved upstate to New York, Buffalo, New York area. And I had enough credits to graduate at 15. So I took Regents classes, but however, New York State says, no, you can't graduate yet, you're too young. So instead, I went to a vocational school, and I always wanted to go into the health profession. So in taking the Buffalo Vocational Technical Center, I actually chose the profession of dentistry. And that's rather shocking, right? Dentistry. And the reason why I chose that, because when I left New Orleans, where it's nice weather, it's very humid, I went from extreme hot to extreme cold, to a snow belt in New York, upstate New York. And it was extremely cold, so I did not want a profession outside. I needed to be indoors, because I had been there not only 2-3 months. So I graduated top of my class, the second in my class, in dentistry, and I had my heart set on the health profession. Then after high school, as 16 years old, 17 years old, when I graduated, I was a certified dental assistant from New York State. So I could have chose that profession and went with it, but I wanted to get out and see the world. I knew I wanted to be able to have some exposure and see some places and do some things I've never imagined that I can do. So I enrolled in or enlisted in the Marine Corps as an infantry, a rifleman, not knowing exactly what I get myself into, because there was not much exposure besides just going to talk to a military recruiter, and still then you don't get the level of exposure that you would hope. So after I actually did 4 years, and I've been able to travel the world, and what I noticed is from my upbringing in New Orleans, even to upstate New York, I realized that those locations that I lived in geographically, they were a little bit not the healthiest, and they were pretty dangerous. And I realized that the world wasn't as dangerous. It was the environment that I grew up in. So ultimately, I relocated once I got out of the Marine Corps, and I worked with the airlines industry for 6.5 years before I hired on with Metro, Las Vegas Metro Police Department. And even then, I wasn't destined. I actually got laid off with the airline industry because it was so stable back in 1999. So I was unemployed 3 times within like 2 months. And ultimately, I had to figure, you know what, I need steady income. So I just looked at the newspaper, didn't have any exposure to law enforcement. No one in my family was ever a police officer. Um, and I'm working with a degree or a certification in dentistry. And other than that, I didn't have any exposure to law enforcement. So I ultimately seen that article in a classified ads, and I tested, and my mindset changed when I said, if I can change and police the world with the Marine Corps, I can police the community that I'm living in. And I was planning on making Las Vegas my community, my home. I knew I wasn't going back to New York where it was cold. So I stayed here and put my heart and soul into testing to become a police officer. And that was 21 years ago. And here I stand before you. So like Deputy Chief McMahill, I never had my eyes set on law enforcement profession. And Judge, you just alluded to it. I mean, you have to look for opportunities and make sure you can identify those opportunities if they come your way. And you always move from one place, like they told us in the Marine Corps, you move from one place of cover to a better place of cover. And I take that analogy, move from one profession to a better profession. And here I stand before you as a sergeant of over 10 years within this awesome police department.
Thank you, Officer Chapman. Let me ask you, one of the questions that keeps coming up from these students are, what kind of salary can they expect to make at Metro? I understand that Metro is a very well-paid entity. Can you talk a little bit about that and what some of the ranges in salaries might be? And perhaps if you want to address the difference in salary if you have a degree versus not having a degree, or how it is that Metro takes into account that kind of education and experience.
Sure. So the salaries within within our agency actually starts off at, I think it's about $57,000 annually, and that's baseline for everyone. Now, obviously, as Deputy Chief McMahill spoke of, if you have college credit, that is an attribute. If you have military preference or military, you receive normally like a 2-point preference point on the initial enrollment. However, I would have to bank on the education and being able to come into a profession, in any profession, with a college degree. Because ultimately what we were able to establish at Metro is education incentives. And when you look at those incentives, sometimes annually, if you're able to show that you have a degree, annually, normally we would have you can submit those degrees to our human resources, and normally there's a stipend that will often allows you extra income on an annual basis. But the flat rate for all officers is pretty much the same, unless you promote or you become a detective and you start to get those specialized skill sets. And then with those specialized skill sets, based on the areas within Metro you want to work in, it's going to determine the pay increases and where your career goes from that point on.
Michael, let me turn to you. What other jobs might exist? And I know that we're going to get to Ms. Merger here shortly, but if you do not want to be a police officer, what other jobs are there available in Metro to students who may or may not want to go to college?
Sure, and I just want to backtrack a little bit and talk about pay for a minute. We are one of the best paid organizations in the entire country. And not only does our baseline pay start off around $56,000, $57,000 a year. There's some things that may not mean a lot to kids right now, but may make sense later, like our health benefits are absolutely fantastic. And the fact that we have a retirement. I grew up kind of taking a retirement for granted because my dad was in the Air Force, and so I thought everybody automatically had a retirement, and that's absolutely not true. But if you hire on with one of the law enforcement agencies that you're going to talk to today, in many of these entities, you have a retirement system where you can stop working with 25 years, 30 years in the system and still continue to collect a paycheck. And that really is a phenomenal benefit. But here's what the other thing I love about Metro is there's so many things you can do, and you're going to hear from undoubtedly one of the most intelligent people that works for us in a minute, Kim Murga. Who her shop is phenomenal, but we hire scientists here. We have a number of scientists that work in our lab. We hire people that fix cars. We have helicopter mechanics, We've got civilians that work as analysts, and much like you see in some of these crime shows that you watch on TV, they don't go out in the field, but they sit at a computer and they will backtrack and search cameras and all types of different data systems that exist out there. And they've been responsible for catching murder suspects, having never left an office. We also have people that all they do is working computers. These are men and women that can build a computer from the ground up, and they do all of our cyber investigation. So it's really not just this uniform, although it's the most notable part of what it is that we do. We have a chief financial officer that runs our entire budget, and we are almost $1 billion agency at this point. So really anything that your heart is interested in, you can probably find something to do here at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, to include going to work every day and having a canine dog as your partner, or flying a helicopter, to working in a lab, working crime scene investigations where you learn about blood splatter. And again, all these things that they make very, very exciting on television, we do that day in and day out here. The opportunities really are limitless here.
Thank you so much. Okay, with that, I think we'll turn to you, Ms. Murga.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kim Murga, and I'm currently the Director of Laboratory Services with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I am a forensic scientist, and I have been a forensic scientist for 24 years. In high school, I always had a strong propensity for science, but I was never a 4.0 student, ever. I may have been like a B plus student, C plus student, and I remember in high school, I took a national science test, and I scored very high in my high school, which was an all-girls Catholic high school. Investigated because they thought that I had maybe been cheating, but I did not. So anyways, they were just not sure that I could score that high. So anyways, I did go to college immediately after high school. I always wanted to be a doctor, a medical doctor, and I always had a propensity towards kind of the macabre or the non-mainstream investigations. At the time, forensics was not a thing. Nobody really knew what forensic science was. And I was interning with the local police department when the O.J. Simpson case occurred. And that case really was the forefront of forensic science and that becoming mainstream, especially with DNA. When I was in college, again, I still wanted to be a medical student. And somebody approached me and said they got this machine and they didn't know how to use it. And it ended up being what's called a DNA polymerase machine, or PCR, which is the foundation of DNA. And really, I kind of stumbled into it. And I actually, after college, which I have a bachelor's degree in biology and a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, I was working on my master's of forensic science. But I started using this machine and I kind of fell into DNA. So while I was getting my master's degree, I was able to get a job with the Department of Defense, specifically the Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory. And I worked there for 11 years, identifying remains from current and previous military conflicts to include World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. While I was there, I also was able to work on identifying Saddam Hussein, working on the family of Osama bin Laden, working on the 9/11 terrorist attacks from both the Pentagon and Pennsylvania plane crash, as well as the Jeffrey McDonald case, which is a Green Beret who murdered his family in 1970. So I worked on a lot of high profile cases, but I realized that I really have an enjoyment from working mainstream crime. And I was lucky to get hired with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department in 2007. I've been with this department for 13 years. I started off in DNA and then eventually progressed into overseeing a forensic laboratory with 85 personnel for its director. So currently I oversee the entire forensic laboratory. We offer firearms analysis, latent print analysis, DNA analysis, toxicology analysis, and seized drugs. So really that's kind of how I started. You know, if you have a propensity for science, there's forensic science as well as working crime scenes. So in order to work crime scenes, you need to have an equivalent of an associate's and take 14 science level classes. So as Chief McMahill did indicate, you can start a career working in the field and then complete your degree and then transition into science. So there is a lot of opportunity on this department.
And Ms. Murga, you mentioned an associate's degree. That would be typically a 2-year program?
That's correct. So you can get an associate's, a 2-year program equivalent of 60 college credits with at least 14 in science and start your career. To work in the forensic laboratory, you do have to have a 4-year degree in a physical, chemical, biological, or forensic science degree. But we do have other opportunities if you have a 2-year degree or an equivalent of a 2-year degree.
And let me just ask you another question. I know that, of course, UNLV is one of the main universities here in Las Vegas, but you would also be able to obtain an associate's degree at other entities that are not as expensive, like community college, for example, or other universities, perhaps even online universities. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So in order to obtain the 2-year degree with 14 college classes, there are a lot of alternative options besides UNLV. However, if you want to work in the lab, you have to take lab classes, which requires hands-on, hard work, writing reports, being exposed to all kinds of scientific instrumentation. However, once you have that degree, you can apply to the laboratory, and we do train people on the job. So we don't expect people to come in knowing how to read latent prints or analyze DNA. We will teach that to them, but they do have to have the foundation of science in order to be successful.
Thank you so much. All right. With that, I think that we've covered sort of the investigation part of crimes. Why don't we turn over to our U.S. Attorney, Mr. Tanich. What happens once you have an officer knocking on your door and saying, "We think we have a case for you"?
Good morning, Your Honor. Thank you, and thank you to all the students that are tuning in. When a officer or a detective from Metro brings over a case, there are prosecutors in my office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, that evaluate the case for a charging decision. And there are various incremental steps of investigation along the way. For instance, as you know, Your Honor, we would apply for a search warrant to you to get court authorization for a search warrant. We might think additional investigatory steps are needed, in which case we might apply for a wiretap affidavit or wiretap application in order to listen into phone calls or to search somebody's home or cell phone for additional evidence. We'll make a charging decision. We'll present a case to the grand jury. And that's really when, and introduce a criminal defendant into the justice system. And that's really when the fine men and women at the Federal Public Defender's Office hold us to account by making sure that the person charged with the federal crimes, constitutional rights are being honored by us. And Your Honor, you get to put on a referee jersey and make sure that everyone's playing by the rules.
That's right. And let me ask you, Mr. Tanich, it seems to me that, I think for everybody that has spoken and everybody who's in this panel, these are not just jobs. These are just sort of, people tend to have like a lot of love and devotion for what they do. Why don't you tell us what is it that drew you to your particular job?
So that's a great question. Every single time I'm in court, as a U.S. attorney, I stand up and I introduce myself. I say, I'm Nick Drutanich and I represent the United States of America. And that's an amazing privilege to do it in courtrooms like the one you're in. I represent the best client in the world, in my opinion, and that's, again, the U.S. It's an awesome responsibility to decide whether somebody should be charged, how long we should advocate for them to go to prison if they're found guilty. But really the best part of being a prosecutor in my mind is even when we lose, quote unquote lose, we actually win. Justice is done. So we go to trial, the public defender's office pokes holes in our theory of the case, and a jury does not vote to convict that particular defendant. The justice system has worked. So that all, there's a lot of lawyers that make more money than the U.S. attorneys the AUSAs in my office. But what they don't get to do is go into court and advocate on behalf of the United States and keep our communities safe. So those are the reasons that people join the U.S. Attorney's Office and join join law enforcement generally. On the other hand, and you're going to hear from a Deputy Federal Public Defender today, there is a lot of honor and privilege in representing clients that can't afford lawyers as well.
Thank you so much. Now, Mr. Dutanic, let me ask you, did you graduate high school and all of a sudden decide that you were going to be the U.S. Attorney in Nevada, and so it was, or did you take some steps to get to where you're at?
Yeah, it didn't just happen. I was lucky though growing up. My father was a gang prosecutor in Compton, California. I didn't really understand what that meant. I just knew that he wore a suit and tie to work, and I kind of wanted to do that as well. And I knew that he loved his job. My mom worked for the airlines as well. Like Ivan did, and she was a flight attendant for 30 years for United Airlines. But I graduated high school, went to college, and it was somewhere near my last year of college where I thought, what do I want to do? And that's when I started studying for the LSAT, which is like the SAT, and then went to law school after taking that test, which is, if you think the SAT is bad, the LSAT's worse. You know, incurred a lot of student debt, and then ultimately went on to be a prosecutor after working for a judge like Your Honor. And I did that in Los Angeles. And the way that I found myself here was there was an opportunity that opened up at the state AG's office. And, you know, I had roots in Los Angeles. I grew up in Los Angeles. I worked in Los Angeles until my 30s. But decided to take on a new challenge of moving states just for an opportunity. So one word of advice that I'd give to students who are contemplating any career is in law enforcement or any one of these things that we talk about are interesting to you, is consistently try to challenge yourself. If there's something, what's worked for me is there's something in my stomach that says I'm afraid of that, I try my best to make sure to run towards it rather than run away from it.
Thank you so much. All right, so let me turn over to Ms. Oliver. So once the U.S. Attorney's Office has made a decision that there's sufficient information for the case to move forward and an individual is charged with an offense, typically they will appear in court and will ask the judge to release them pending trial. And I think this is where your office comes in. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, and thank you, Judge Wexler, for including pretrial services in this presentation today. So as a pretrial services officer, we are tasked with investigating and supervising individuals. We refer to them as defendants with federal offenses. So the investigate part involves interviewing defendants who have just been arrested by a federal law enforcement agency like FBI, DEA, ATF. We also interview their friends and family, employers, any parties that we can get our hands on, we like to talk to. We also use criminal arrest records and a variety of online databases to write a report for the judge, like Judge Wexler. That report includes a lot of details about the defendant's background, based on that information that we gathered during the investigation. Sometimes pretrial services is referred to as the front door of the legal system in federal court, because the pretrial services officer is one of the first people a defendant will talk to after they've been arrested. Typically, the defendant is arrested and is taken to the U.S. Marshal Service. They may speak to an attorney briefly, and then the pretrial services officer comes in and starts asking questions about the background with the goal of putting all of that information together in a report for the judge. So at the defendant's very first appearance in court, we submit that report to the judge, and that report includes a recommendation. That recommendation is whether we believe that a defendant should be released on bond or bail, or detained and kept in custody while their case proceeds through the system. That recommendation that we make to the judge is based on that information that we gathered during the investigation And specifically, we're looking at the risk of danger to the community that the defendant presents, as well as any risk of non-appearance or the likelihood that the defendant will return to court hearings on their own or not. And of course, ultimately, the judge has the final determination whether that defendant will be released or not. But if the defendant is released, then the second part of our job is to supervise. That includes meeting regularly with defendants in the pretrial services office or in the community. That could be at their homes or place of work. Some defendants are on what we call location monitoring. So we monitor their place in the community, where they go, when they come home, through an ankle bracelet. Some defendants have to be drug tested. Some defendants we plug into mental health counseling or substance abuse counseling, all based on those risks that we identified during the investigation. One of the most rewarding parts of my job is being able to meet a defendant's needs with resources and referrals in the community, and being able to watch lives change while at the same time performing those law enforcement duties and protecting the safety of the community. Our work, notably with defendants, is guided by perhaps one of the most important legal principles, which is the presumption of innocence, or as you may be more familiar with, innocent until proven guilty. We do our very, very best to treat everyone who comes through our doors with dignity and respect, and with that presumption of innocence. I also wanted to include that new pretrial services officers attend a 6-week training course at a law enforcement training academy, and also receive a whole lot of on-the-job training on an ongoing basis.
Ms. Oliver, do you need a college degree in order to obtain a job in your office?
So yes and no. To be a pretrial services officer, a pretrial services officer assistant, which is an entry-level officer position, and other officer and supervisory management positions, yes, a 4-year degree is required. Pretrial services, though, does offer other career paths, as we've heard from others before. Pretrial services here in the District of Nevada often has intern positions available. That position just requires a high school diploma. And the requirement also is that you must be pursuing either a part-time or full-time undergraduate, a 4-year degree, or a graduate degree while you are participating in the internship, and that's a paid position. Another position that is available in the pretrial services office is as a pretrial services technician. A technician works closely with pretrial services officers. They learn about the duties and responsibilities of an officer and perform clerical tasks. That's another one that requires only a high school diploma.
Thank you so much. You did mention the marshals. Do we have Marshal Schofield? No, we had him earlier. All right, we'll skip him for now and see if we can join him up later on. Let me move on to Ms. Sanchez. Ms. Sanchez, when we are in court, oftentimes we do find individuals that do not speak the English language. And I know that you're a translator who translates from Spanish into English and English into Spanish, but there's other translators as well that deal with the translation of other languages. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I sure can. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. I have the honor and the privilege of working with Your Honor and just about every one of the people in this meeting. And I like to say that I have the best job there is, because I am part of everything in every step of the process. Just to give you a little bit of information about me, I am a federally certified court interpreter. I am also certified with the state of Nevada, and I'm also certified with the state of California. So I have 3 certifications. I've been doing this for a while. And I love what I do. And the way that I stumbled upon this career is because I personally love languages. I love culture, and I wanted to study something related to foreign relations or something like that. But due to practicality, I went into finance. Um, and I got my, I went to college for finance, but life, such as it is, will put you where you need to go. And I found out about becoming an interpreter. And an interpreter, there's a difference. And these I would like to clarify. There is interpreters and there's translators. And an interpreter could be a translator, and maybe a translator could be an interpreter. But these are two separate careers. So you can be one or the other or both. What is the difference? An interpreter deals with the spoken language. Every time there's an interview, the interpreter will be working. Every time there is a document where you need to read and write in the opposite language, then you need a translator. That's why I am a certified court interpreter. So, and my job is not, I mean, I work with Your Honor and you get to see me in court, but the reality is I work with just every one of these amazing individuals. I work with pretrial services on their interviews of the defendant. I work with the attorneys when they meet with their clients. I work with every expert in the field when they have to testify in court. Sometimes they have to testify as to the chemistry of the drugs or forensics or medical or whatever it is, their expertise. And the interpreter has to be able to know all of these vocabulary that is needed in court, besides the legalese, because you need to know that too. So I've studied all of that. My degree, technically speaking, has nothing to do with interpreting. So in order to become an interpreter, you really don't need a degree. However, just like I mentioned, you have to know the legalese, you have to know about chemistry, you have to know about medicine, you have to know just about every field, because whatever brings a person into court, the interpreter has to know about it. We deal with family matters, we deal with relationship matters, we deal with every aspect of human life. So like I said, I had to become certified. I lived in California when I first started my career. So I had to study and pass a test with the state of California, which a lot of people say was equivalent of the bar, because it required a lot of knowledge of medical and legal field and everything. Then I moved to Nevada, which I had to certify in the state of Nevada. I had to study and take the test. And then I decide, why not? I can be federally certified, I'm going for it. So I got my federal certification, and then I had the privilege of becoming the coordinator in federal court. And that allows me to deal not only with my set of languages to interpret from, which is Spanish. I also deal with interpreters from every language: Russian, Mandarin, Swahili, you name it. I work with so many talented individuals who are able to interpret in the legal field. So
Ms. Sanchez, let me ask you, I think that there are a lot of our students who are watching, a lot of them may have Spanish as their first known language, their first tongue. Is there a big need in this community for either translators or interpreters for Spanish language?
There is a huge need, not just in the legal field, but in the medical field. Even Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department have their own interpreters, which go in the field when it's needed, because of the fact that our community is so diverse. We have people coming from Ethiopia, we have people coming from China, Philippines, Latin America. there is a huge need for interpreters in every language and in all the fields.
All right, thank you for that. Marshall Schofield, I see you on the screen. We were just talking a little bit about when pretrial services interviews defendants, and she mentioned that defendants come in contact with the Marshal's office. So let me turn to you. Can you tell us a little bit about the Marshal's office and what that job consists of? I think you may be muted. No. Do you want to call in? I'll have Jeff email you the information so that you can call in, and I will turn to Brian Blevins, who is a probation officer, and then we'll get back to you, Marshall Schofield. So tell us, Mr. Blevins, what is the Department of Probation? So we've heard about pretrial services. Can you talk to us about probation and some of the differences between your job and Ms. Oliver's job? We can't hear you. So, Mr. Blevins, what we'll do is we'll ask you to also call in. So, Mr. Miller will go ahead and email you that information. Let me turn on to Ms. Brooks Whittington, the Federal Public Defender's Office. So we heard a little bit from the U.S. Attorney's Office about what their job is in the criminal justice system when they believe that they have sufficient information to bring a case forward, to prosecute that case, to bring it before a jury and have a jury decide whether that individual is guilty or not guilty. What is the job of the defense attorney? And maybe you can also speak about what the job of the Federal Public Defender is as opposed to that of a private defense attorney.
First of all, can you guys hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, perfect. Well, first off, I'd like to say thank you, Your Honor, for inviting me to participate in this panel. It's been really incredible listening to everyone's story and their path to getting in these professions. And as Chris mentioned earlier, she believes she has the best job for herself. And I think each of us feel like we have the best job. And I think that is because we have each found passion. We have found joy in our professions. And so to the students, I would say, look for your joy. Look for the thing that makes you happy in the morning. And it may not make you happy every morning, but at least look for that because then you have found the path that is right for you. Turning now to Judge Wexler's question in terms of being with the Federal Public Defender's Office, our role is to represent individuals who cannot afford legal counsel. Our mission is to provide our clients with effective legal representation, regardless of whether our clients can pay for it or not. Our clients who have been charged with committing offense against the United States have a right to legal representation by the Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution. And so my office in particular, we have 3 different units. We have a trial unit, and connected to our unit is an appellate unit. We also have a non-capital habeas unit and a capital habeas unit. So I work in the trial unit, and I've been in this position for about 10 years. And as a trial attorney, I meet my client once they make their initial appearance in court. At that initial appearance, they're made aware of what they have been charged with. They're also around that initial appearance where they plead not guilty to the charge. I will interview the client to find out as many details as I can about them personally. I will also contact pretrial services if it's a client that we are seeking release for, and they will interview with pretrial services, as Aaron mentioned earlier. And typically at that initial appearance, we are trying to get our client out of custody so that they can be out of custody while we fight to resolve their case. My goal is to make sure that my client receives justice, that my client's rights are upheld. I want to be sure that how they were brought up on charges, and to be sure that their constitutional rights were respected throughout the entire process. And if those rights were not respected, or if those rights were violated in any way, then I am looking for ways to bring that information before the court, whether it be by a motion to suppress or a motion to dismiss the case. And I also represent my client at trial. If my client decides to go to trial, then I want to present the best defense that I can for my client, and I want hopefully for the jury to find my client not guilty. At the trial level, it is the government's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that my client has committed the offense. And even if my client is found guilty ultimately of the offense, I continue to represent my client at the sentencing phase of his or her case. And again, I'm still working in my client's best interest to try to get him or her the least amount of time in custody as possible, and to present a plan to the court as to what is an appropriate sentence in his or her case.
So, Ms. Brooks, you are a public defender, and a lot of people have this notion that if you were to be in private practice, you could be making 2 or 3 times as much money as you're making now. Why be a public defender? And the same question was sort of addressed by our U.S. attorney. Why public service?
I guess the best way for me to answer that is maybe to talk a little bit about my path. I've always been interested in public interest. I've always been interested in helping my community. And that I didn't start out wanting to be an attorney. I had actually started out wanting to be a teacher. And I would say around the age of 7 or 8, I was gathering the neighborhood kids who were maybe a year younger than me and pulling them into my basement. And I'd have my chalkboard and I'm teaching them, you know, things about school. And so it wasn't until I was probably 10 years old that I was introduced to the legal system. And I wasn't introduced in a way where I had any family members or friends who were lawyers or judges or pretrial services officers or anything like that. I didn't know about the field in that way. I knew about the legal field because I had an uncle who constantly found himself in and out of the criminal justice system. Unfortunately, he committed crimes. He would end up in custody. And each time that he was accused of committing a crime, he was appointed a public defender. My family could not afford to hire him an attorney. And I remember on one particular occasion, my mom and I went to the public defender's office because the public defender had called her and said that he wanted to talk to her about my uncle. And so she took me along with her. And I remember being in his office. I remember feeling as if, you know, he didn't know a lot about my uncle or his case. He didn't really remember why my mom was even there. And it made me sad. And it made me feel like this is not how it's supposed to be. Even though I didn't know anything about the profession, I just felt that something wasn't right. I felt that this man was probably really burdened and had a ton of cases and was having a hard time keeping track of everything that he had going on. So in that particular moment, I had decided I want to be like him, but better. I want to be in this role where I help people who can afford an attorney, but they deserve equal, effective representation, just like someone who could pay to hire an attorney. And so from that day forward, for me, I did everything that I could to become an attorney. I did a lot of research. I talked to my teachers in school. Everyone knew in the neighborhood that I wanted to be an attorney. And I had people looking out for me. Starting in high school, I looked through the curriculum when I picked my classes. Where is there something that has the word law in it? And thankfully, they had a program. And there was a teacher there who I could talk to about me wanting to be a lawyer and the type of lawyer that I wanted to be. That teacher then recommended me for a program, and I'm from Chicago. He recommended me for a program, and it was called the Illinois Governmental Internship Program, where I spent the last semester of my senior year in Springfield, Illinois, which is the capital of Illinois, and I worked for a semester at the state's attorney's office as an intern. Work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and it was really on the other side than what I'm on now, but I think it was helpful to be in that position. I got to see things from the government's perspective. I got to interact with victims of crimes and see how they felt being on the other side. And from that experience on, I just continued to involve myself in any way that I could find for the legal system. And so one of the things I like to share with students is I think it's about drive, persistence. I may not have been the A student, like all A's. I was an A and B student, but I was the student who always persisted. Even when I heard no's, I continued to knock on the door and do anything that I could because I felt that this was the right profession for me.
Thank you. Now, on that point, could you share with the students the range of salaries in the public sector? And I think that the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Federal Public Defender's Office are pretty much step in step in terms of how much those positions may pay. What are the ranges there, and what kind of schooling do you need?
So in terms of schooling, I completed 4 years in college. I graduated with my Bachelor of Arts degree in the Administration of Justice. And then I went on to law school, and that was a 3-year program that I completed. After law school, I then sat for the bar, the Illinois bar. So I'm licensed to practice in the state of Illinois, and I'm also licensed federally. And my first job out of law school was as a judicial law clerk. I clerked for Judge Hunt, who sat on the federal bench. He's no longer there, but I clerked for him for 2 years. And so out of law school, my starting salary was, I would say, $65,000. And then the second year of my clerkship, that increased. When I came over to the Federal Public Defender's Office, I think my starting salary was $71,000. And I can say every year my salary has increased. I believe the range is probably still between $70,000 and $170,000 in the Federal Public Defender's Office. I think for me, that was well more than what I had anticipated as a public defender. I had known when I started researching the profession that public defenders don't necessarily make a lot of money, and I was okay with that. I just wanted to be able to care for my family and take care of myself. So it's been an added bonus that I am making a really good salary and am able to support my family.
And thanks for that. Let me turn to you, Mr. Drutanich. If you, and I think that the salaries are sort of commensurate with the U.S. Attorney's Office as well, but if you do not want to be an attorney either in the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Federal Public Defender's Office, what other jobs are there that students may want to be interested, may be interested in?
Sure, thank you for the question. That's a great point that you're making. So we have 130 people in our office, about 60 or so are attorneys, and the other 70 are staff professionals, and they help us get our job done. So we couldn't do our job in court without them. So we have a litigation support team. That team essentially organizes all of the evidence and gives it to the federal public defenders so that they can review it with their client. They also that team also develops PowerPoints or different exhibits that we can put in front of the judges or the jury during trial. And they make a good amount of money, starting at about $45,000 up to $90,000. Then you have the victim witness unit. And the victim witness unit is just that. They deal with victims of crime and make sure that the victims are informed of court appearances by the defendant, or let them know when the defendant is pleading guilty or whether the defendant is going to go to trial, and they let them know of all the relevant information about that. Likewise, the victim witness team coordinates witness travel when a witness needs to fly from out of state to come and testify before the court. Our office also has a press department where we have somebody that drafts press releases or coordinates interviews with the media on cases that there's a public interest in. And another important thing, and particularly relevant for those of you students, is we have a student worker program where 2 or 3 days a week, depending on your class schedule, we have 3 to 4 students working each semester, making good money with respect to hourly wages. So if you're interested in something like that, I'd encourage you to call my assistant at 388-6567. And we have periodically, especially at the beginning or end of a semester, one of our students is on to bigger and better things, or decides to take a job elsewhere, an internship elsewhere. And so there's vacancies that pop up every once in a while.
That is wonderful information. Thank you. Now, let me turn back to you, Ms. Brooks. If you're not an attorney at the Federal Public Defender's Office, what kinds of jobs could you have over there?
So we have positions for law school students. You have interns that come sometimes during the summer and sometimes during the school year who may work part-time. We also have secretarial positions, and while having a degree is always preferred, we do have secretaries here who do not have a college degree. They do have their high school diploma. And so for secretarial positions, they're typically looking for someone who's organized, someone who can communicate well, someone who can do filings online, and a host of other skills. We also have paralegal positions, as well as we have a translator here. So in terms of the paralegal positions, I did speak to a paralegal here, and she does not have a college degree, but she did more on the work training. And in terms of being a paralegal, I think it just depends on the attorney that you're working for. Paralegals are typically doing legal research or drafting memos, again, having good organizational skills and communication skills. And the other position we have in the office is clerical assistants. Again, typically you don't have to have a college degree. The clerical assistants will assist with copying, preparing files, sometimes taking documents over to the U.S. Attorney's Office or to the courts. And then another position is investigators. We have investigators in the office. Again, a college degree is preferred, but we do have investigators who investigate our cases, who meets with our clients, talk to witnesses, do documentary investigation. So we have a host of positions in this office that doesn't necessarily require a college degree, but as always, it is preferred. And I would say to contact me, and I can put you in touch with the right person in the office who can let the students know if any of those positions are available. And my number is 388-6577 is the main line, and my name is Nisha Brooks Whittington.
Thank you so much. All right, so let me turn over to Marshall Schofield. Can you hear us okay?
Your Honor, I'd like to go ahead and take the opportunity to open the phone line now so
right.
we can hear from Marshall Schofield.
Let's go ahead and do that.
Welcome to AT&T's teleconference. To join the conference, please enter your There are 2 participants on the call, including you. You are joining your conference as the host. For a menu of available commands, press *#.
Marshall Schofield, can you hear us?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Your Honor. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much. Well, welcome to this panel.
Thank you. I apologize. The Marshal Service doesn't allow us to put Zoom on our computer, so I have to figure out different ways to get onto it. So.
No problem. So, Marshall Schofield, we've heard a little bit from Pretrial Services. Ms. Oliver talked about how defendants will first come into contact with her office to give some information to them so that they can make a recommendation to the judge as to release or detention pending trial. But I think that prior to seeing Ms. Oliver, they probably have some interaction with your office. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So the Marshal Service is the enforcement arm for the judiciary, for the courts, the federal courts. And one of the large functions we handle, of course, is detention. So for the students that are listening to this, the best analogy is we are the sheriff for the federal law enforcement and the federal side of policing throughout the country.
Is everybody muted? All right, go ahead, Marshall Schofield.
as I was stating, we're the ones that take individuals into custody on any given case, and we're the people that bring these individuals into custody in and out of the federal courts.
Not sure where that feedback is coming from. Is that distracting to you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
How about now?
Perfect.
So we are the, for the lack of a better term, the federal agency that handles all the in-custodies for all federal prisoners that are brought in and out of federal court.
All right. What kind of a degree do you need to be part of the marshals, if any at all?
So the Marshal Service, to begin as a basic marshal, you have to have a bachelor's degree. And I know there's been some questions as to how much the basic pay starts out at. A GS7 entry-level deputy U.S. Marshal starts out around 45. But after 2 years, they go up to about 63 to 64, depending on the part of the country that they're posted to. The marshals are within 94 different federal districts throughout the country. And we have marshals in 218 sub-offices throughout the country, along with 4 foreign field offices that we man. For example, we have U.S. Marshals that are working in Mexico, down in the middle, Central America, and of course over in Europe and different places like that.
All right, thank you. And I imagine, Marshal Schofield, that a lot of the deputies that work in your office have some prior work in Metro or some other police department. Is that correct?
That's correct. One of the interesting things about Marshal Service is there's very few people that come directly into the Marshal Service's deputies. The majority of them come from local law enforcement or state law enforcement agencies or other federal agencies. The last 3 that came into this office, one of them was a Border Patrol officer, another one worked in the Forest Service as a law enforcement officer, and another individual worked in Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement for a period of time in the Bureau of Prisons and those places.
All right. All right, thank you so much. Let me turn it over to Mr. Blevins. Mr. Blevins, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me now?
Perfectly. So, Mr. Blevins, you are in the Department of Probation. Can you tell us a little bit about your department in comparison with pretrial services? What are some of the differences between your department and that of Ms. Oliver's?
Absolutely. So I was able to listen to part of Ms. Oliver, but I've worked in the pretrial field a little bit myself, and essentially we get to watch people, we get to kind of supervise people after they come out of prison or they're placed on probation by the courts. Currently, I kind of wanted to cite part of our mission statement. That is basically that we exist to provide a balance between protecting the community and assisting people to function with society. And our goal is essentially to make a positive impact on the lives of others. And I was kind of thinking about this, and I just kind of a personal note, and I thought, as far as being a probation officer, I kind of feel like I get to help speak into the lives of others to do better and to become better. And I also think as a result of that, I hope that I become a better person as a result. We have a staff of about 55 employees. We have a chief, a deputy chief. We have 7 supervisors. I'm one of the supervisors here in our supervision unit, where we have 4 supervisors. We have 29 officers and 17 support staff. Of our 29 probation officers, 20 of them are actually supervision. The other 9 are investigators. And one of the stark differences too with investigations is once a person is found guilty or they plead guilty to a case or a crime, the courts order us to prepare what's called a pre-sentence investigation. So essentially what that is we interview the person who's been convicted, and we basically do background investigation, draft essentially an autobiography, and provide the court and both counsel, the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Federal Defender's Office, with a document that really helps all parties meet out the most appropriate sentence for that person.
And let me ask you, Mr. Blevins, do you need a four-year degree to work in the office of the probation department?
We do require a 4-year degree. It seems as though like more sociological type degrees are probably more preferred. However, I think just the mere fact that a person completes the course, they complete a course of study is very admirable, and we're just able to really utilize those skills, talents, and abilities that people have obtained and generated during the course of their education and experiences.
All right, thank you. Well, I think with that, we'll turn over to my job. So I'm a magistrate judge. I'm quite new at this. I have a little bit over a year on the bench, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about my path. So I was born and raised in Argentina, which means that my first language was Spanish. And I moved here with my parents when I was 14 years old. You've heard a little bit about SATs and ACTs. I had no idea what that was. My parents had no idea what that was. And one of the things that I want to make sure that you do, and I think that Ms. Brooks mentioned along the way, is to make sure that you yourself take charge of your own future. So ask questions. You have this incredible panel in front of you who is willing to answer questions, and it's telling you they have opportunities available in their different departments. So take advantage of those opportunities. I didn't have this panel available to me. Certainly when I was growing up, I did not have jobs for Nevada graduates available to me when I was growing up. And like I said, I really had no idea about what kinds of things I needed to do. So I'm telling you this because while the notion of having a 4-year degree or a 7-year degree may seem like an insurmountable task, I can tell you that if you plan ahead and you just sort of chunk things out into little goals, you can get there. I started out at community college, so I paid for my own education. My parents did not pay for my college, so I couldn't afford to go to UNLV, so I was working at a coffee shop and going to community college during the days that I was not working. Eventually, I transferred the credits that I had at community college over to UNLV. I graduated from UNLV. I've always worked throughout, so I've always gone to school and worked. So it is not the case that you cannot do that. It takes a lot of organization, it takes a lot of commitment, but I want to make sure that you understand that you do not have to be born to rich parents in order to go to college and accomplish all of the things that these individuals before you have accomplished. When I graduated from UNLV, I graduated with a degree in English and a minor in philosophy. And I told my parents that I wanted to look into anthropology. They were not very happy with the notion of me being an anthropologist. I wanted to teach. I knew by then that if I wanted to teach at the university level, I was going to have to move outside of Las Vegas. I was not willing to do that because all of my family was in Vegas, and that was important to me. So at the same time, the law school opened here in Las Vegas. I applied and I got in. But as you've heard along the way, most of us sort of fall into the professions that we're in. Ms. Brooks knew when she was 10 years old. I certainly did not know when I was 10 years old that I was going to become an attorney. So I went to law school, and one of the things that I remember distinctly from my law school career was that I knew I did not want to be a criminal defense attorney. No way, no how was I going to do criminal defense. I was open to anything but. At the same time, a job opened up at the Federal Public Defender's Office as a law clerk. I needed the money. I started working there, and the rest was history. I ended up becoming a federal public defender. I worked in that office for 17 years before becoming a judge. And I'm telling you this because I want you to be open-minded about what each of these jobs may have, may hold, what kind of careers you may have with all of these different jobs. And while you may think that you're not interested in something until you learn more about it, you truly are not going to know. So open yourselves up to those possibilities. I guess one of the things that's important that I share with you is I think a lot of individuals, the individuals that you've been talking to here, could be making a lot more money in other fields, and they've chosen to do what they do because they truly love what they do. And that goes for myself as well. While money is of course important, and that's something that you need in order to help sustain your family and your loved ones, I think that what's most important really is loving what you do, because if you love what you do, success will inevitably follow. So the key here is try to find what it is that really has meaning for you, and whatever it is that makes you feel like you're not going to work in the morning, that it's not something that you hate to do. It should be something that you're looking forward to do. Once you have that feeling, I think that you know that you've arrived to the place or the type of field that you may want to be in. So pay attention to those things as well as along the way. So as far as what I do, I think most of you already know what judges do. We resolve disputes, so both in the criminal arena as well as the civil arena, which are typically contract disputes or personal injury disputes, commercial disputes. So we're just simply resolving disputes between the parties. While I do sit on this bench for some time, the majority of my time is spent in the office doing a lot of reading, a lot of writing, and it's not as glorious as it may seem in TV shows and movies. It's a lot of tedious work in terms of like the kind of reading and close attention that you need to pay to the writings before you. So having said all of that, I love what I do. I think my job is a really important one. I think that I'm really giving back to the community by doing what I do. So with that, I think that we have accomplished the task today, which is to sort of introduce you to the different jobs, tell you why each of us feels that public service is meaningful and important. We've given you an idea of some of the salary ranges, some of the career paths that you may end up emulating to get where you might want to get. But I will go ahead and share with your teachers all of the contact information for everybody who is here today so that you can follow up. And the one thing that I can tell you is you can have lots of these programs shown to you. You can have a lot of people tell you to do X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, it's in your hands. So it's up to you to pick up the phone and call each one of us and say, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm interested in this. I'm interested in that. How do you suggest that I overcome this obstacle or this obstacle? We may not have all of the answers for you, but we're here to try to help you out, and we really do wish the best for you. So please take advantage of this opportunity. Well, with that, I wanted to thank our panel one more time. I know that all of you are very busy, and I really do appreciate you taking your time to serve as part of this important conversation that I know the students will have found really important and meaningful. So thanks all of you, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.